What is up, night crawlers? Welcome back to the Nightmare's Edge. We are back with some terrifying true encounters of the paranormal. A huge thank you to BoozeandBoos for joining me today. He is a very talented narrator. Be sure to check the description for his socials and link to his YouTube channel. Subscribe for some amazing content. Also, I wanted to say thank you to the authors of these stories for allowing us to read them. I will have the links and story information in the description as well. Now, sit back, relax, and let us tickle those inner fears. I will start off by saying that the event took place in Mexico, a place called Guanajuato. I had just moved there a few months before having my second son, and a lot of people in Mexico believe that if a child isn't baptized soon, a witch will come and take the child. The first night I slept in that house before having my second son, I had a really vivid dream of a black mist floating above me and my 1-year-old. I could clearly see how it was just looking at my son. After a few minutes of seeing the black mist, my son woke up crying, but I couldn't move whatsoever. I could just hear him screaming and crying, and I was finally able to wake up, and my son was asleep. He was never woken up or had been crying. A couple months later, I had my second son. We went to bed like normal, with my newborn sleeping in the middle, and in the middle of the night I hear a loud noise and wake up to see my son on the floor, almost under the bed. And please remember, he is a newborn at this time, so no rolling or moving basically. I got up and picked him up and went straight to my mother-in-law's. She lived next door, and I explained what happened, and she told me that a witch was trying to take my son since he was not baptized. After that night, a lot of weird noises would happen near my room, and a black cat would always be outside my window. I later moved out of that house, and my brother-in-law and his wife and newborn moved in, and a lot of things would happen to them as well.
I really don't share this story for several reasons. One is being obviously seen as unhinged or a liar. The other, probably a stronger reason. I'm still afraid that will come after me. I'm really curious, though, about other people's encounters. I've seen a couple similar stories on here. In Mexican folklore, there's a story about a dismembered hairy hand that will tickle misbehaving children who don't go to sleep when they're told to. Essentially, it's a boogeyman, do what your parents say type of monster. There's probably several variations, but this is the one that I grew up with. When I was 3, I was sleeping on the bottom bunk and awoke to something tapping my right hand. There were 2 large drawers where my sister and I kept all of our toys beneath the bed. Whatever was tapping on me was coming from the drawer underneath me. Before I opened my eyes, I just felt this frantic, or enthusiastic, I guess, tapping on my hand. I remember the slapping sound too. My parents would leave the hallway light on to help my sister and I sleep comfortably. So I saw what was waking me up viscerally. I opened my eyes and saw this large hand curved up from beneath the bottom bunk, slapping my own hand. Imagine man hands from Seinfeld. It was green like the color of pea soup. It had black hair on the back of its hand that traveled up its fingers. The fingernails were also green, though short. Maybe it got a mani before visiting me. Its skin was really dry, and I distinctly remember how coarse the skin felt. When I started moving my hand, it almost looked like it was signing to me. It looked like it was saying Y in ASL. I have no idea what that would even translate to in dismembered hand language, but I remember its moving fingers and the hand like it was trying to tell me something. I squealed, shut my eyes, and covered my hand under the pillow. I started screaming frantically for my parents, and I could hear my sister shifting above me. Both my parents ran in, and I'm obviously inconsolable. My dad told me it was just him teasing me, and then my memory of the rest stops right there. The next morning at breakfast, I was eating pancakes with my family. I asked why Dad was playing a prank on me and tapping my hand from under the bed. My parents looked at each other tensely and then quickly changed the subject. I feel like I will never have an answer to what had happened. The rest of my arm was covered by my blanket, so my one theory is that I thought I was another severed hand. Is that even possible? For years as a kid, I thought I saw it a couple more times, and that it would run around the other hands, pure black, pure white, but those might have just been nightmares. I started dreaming then about being tickled and suffocated by a severed hand and feet. It almost sounds comical at this point, but fuck, it was terrifying, man. What's wild to me is that my cousin, who was the same age as me, also experienced a severed green hand chasing her up the basement steps until she shut the door on it. I also have a friend who, without knowing anything about my experience, told me his cousin saw a green dismembered hand, trying to coax her into the bedroom closet late at night. She was around 3 or 4 at the time. Was there just something in the air in the 90s or what?
I'm Brazilian. English is a little bit rusty, but the important thing is that you understand what I'm trying to say. Years ago, I had a little problem with some strange type of epilepsy while trying to sleep that also involved seeing strange entities in my room. And now that I got physically attacked by something, it all makes total sense. It all started years ago when I was trying to sleep one night, but every single time I was close to finally start sleeping, my body suddenly started to tremble involuntarily, and I was unable to move my body to stop it. Fortunately, these epilepsy attacks lasted a maximum of 2 seconds, and every time it happened, I had strange visions, like seeing the head of a snake in front of me or in front of my bed watching me. I also had the feeling of someone literally trying to pull my leg. It is worth mentioning that I had never had a problem like this before, and even after these events, I was always exposed to possible epilepsy triggers and never had attacks. It just started on a random day and suddenly stopped days later. My mother thought I had some spiritual connection, but I hadn't believed her. Although I believe that the electrical discharge in the brain caused by epilepsy attacks can temporarily activate some parts of the brain and have you see things that you can't see with the naked eye. It wasn't possible that I was being attacked by some type of entity. After that horrible week where I couldn't literally sleep, everything finally stopped and I could finally rest. The attacks continued happening, but was really rare, like one time a month, and I had stopped having hallucinations. Last year I moved from the city and continued my life well and happy, but now it is apparently happening again. I started having those little body tremblings again, but now I can literally feel something slowly trying to take off my shirt. I was so naive that I never paid attention to this thing touching me, and every time I had these attacks, I thought it was nothing special. But yesterday, I had an attack and I saw someone standing in front of my bed and observing things, or just looking at nothing. These visions are always kind of blurry, so it looked like a blonde, lean man. I didn't care about that and went back to sleep. Now that I'm writing this, it's 3:15 a.m. and I don't want to go back to sleep. Around 2:10 a.m., I put my phone on the charge and tried to sleep. I wasn't even close to sleeping, and I felt the entity again, but this time, it looked really angry. It tried to take off my shirt by force and started hitting me with its hands. I saw it face to face. The vision was blurry and the room was dark, but I could literally see some of its form by the energy it exhaled. It definitely didn't have a human form, and it was so angry I could feel it. It lasted no more than 2 seconds, and when it ended, I turned the lights on and saw the bruises it did on my arms, to the point where my skin is now red. Suddenly, it all makes sense now. It was never epilepsy episodes. It is a sexual entity trying to feed on my energy. I told it to fuck off and turned my cell phone back on to try and tell the story to someone who is still awake, but everyone seems to be sleeping. Does anyone who understands the arts of the esoteric, spiritual, whatever, can help me get rid of it? I really don't want to go back to sleep now because I think it will try to attack me again. I think this entity may be a male, incubus. I'm bisexual, but prefer mostly guys. Fun fact, I was always told that I have metaunic abilities, and considering some things I've discovered about myself recently, the information may be true. Fun fact 2, since my birth until 13 years old, I was constantly haunted by shadow people, but I got so used to these types of things that I don't even fear them anymore. They even stopped appearing after that, so even though an entity tried to assault me, I wasn't scared. It's not like a bodiless creature could easily kill me.
Sorry for the long post. I had experience that I cannot explain in any way. This happened when I was maybe 13 or 14, and I want to believe this was a dream, but I know it happened. I'm from Eastern Slovakia, in a city that isn't necessarily religious, but has a lot of stories about demons and unholy things. We have one specific legend about what we call a Zerdalak, a demon that mirrors whoever is looking at it, but I never really believed in that stuff. We live in a small Slavic house, and I shared a room with my brother and 2 sisters. One night I was in bed and having trouble sleeping, just lying there wide awake. After what seemed like a couple of hours, I decided to go to the bathroom. We didn't have a bathroom inside, so you had to go out the front door, around the house to the outhouse. I get up and step over my brother to leave the room and go out the front door. I grab my glasses on the way, so I can see clearly outside. I know I wasn't just mistaking these things for bad vision. As soon as I step outside, I turn to the left to go around the house, and I am face to face with myself, maybe 2 meters in front of me. It is clearly me. Same face, same age, same glasses, wearing different clothes than I was wearing, but still clothes that I had owned. We stared at one another, both wide-eyed in shock, neither of us moving. After maybe 5 seconds, he just turns around casually and walks around the corner of the house. I am frozen and in shock. I know I'm not dreaming. After a minute or 2, I slowly walk around the corner and there is no one there, just the outhouse maybe 15 meters away. So I go to it and pee really fast, and then get back inside and get in bed. I lie awake confused and rethinking what had just happened, and eventually I finally fall asleep. I don't know how long it was, but I wake up at some point to someone yelling. I sit up startled, and my brother, who is 8 or 9 years old at the time, comes running back into the room yelling all types of crevasse and peklos. He's freaking out, pacing back and forth in our room. Me and my now awake sister try to calm him down and ask what happened. He looked like he's having a psychotic breakdown. After a few minutes, we get him to calm down and talk to us about what had happened. He said he went outside to use the bathroom, just as I did, and as soon as he got outside of the door, he came face to face with himself. He told the exact same story I did. My sisters tell him he's just tired and seeing things. It was just a bad dream. I never said anything to him. He said he didn't want to go pee anymore, and he got into bed. We all went back to sleep, and I never told him about my experience. Ever. I hadn't thought about this until today. It's been well over a decade. I'm now living in Salt Lake City. I woke up this morning next to my girlfriend who's still asleep. I go about my morning, get up and put my contacts in, brush my teeth, and do the normal things. I decided to go to the gym before my girlfriend woke up, so I get ready and leave the house. I go down the stairs and out into the parking lot. But as soon as I turn to the left to go towards my car, there I am again. But this time, I'm not face to face. The other me is standing maybe 100 meters away behind my car. I start walking towards him, never taking my eyes off him. We are staring at one another. I get to 40 meters away, and I can clearly tell it is myself. What makes me more certain is he is wearing a green jacket that I had in my passenger seat of my car. It is not easy to mistake. At about 20 meters away, he turns and walks behind the car, and I lose sight of him. I get to my car and look in the window. My jacket is no longer on my seat. I am so freaked out at this point, I just go back into my apartment and get back in bed. I'm lying here typing this out now, and I'm in shock. I know I'm not dreaming, because I'm clearly wide awake. I don't know if this Zerdalak is real, or if it's just some kind of sick hallucination.
I really don't know where to start, so I'm just going to ramble out what happened. I was on my way to work, just as a normal any other day. Same time, same route, same music, same coffee. Almost made it there too. In all honesty, I don't remember what made me drive off the road and into the ditch totaling my car. I don't remember the crash. I swear to this day, I made it to the next stop sign and got behind a black Dodge Challenger and made the next right turn behind it. It must have been an out-of-body experience because my car and I were in a ditch 20 to 30 feet before that stop sign. Fast forward, I woke up in the hospital, disoriented and confused. I had never been in a hospital bed staring at the ceiling before, so I guess I was asked the routine questions. Do you know where you are? My smartass always has something to say. It's not heaven. I probably wouldn't be going there. A hospital? Do you know why you're here? and for the love of all that's good, I could not remember one single bit of it. I legitimately thought I made it to that stop sign. Didn't even know I had a car accident. No, what happened? Is there anyone you'd like us to contact? I didn't remember that I was married, much less the name of my spouse. But it was at that moment when I looked up and saw at the foot of my bed 3 large shadows. There was one officer at the window to my left, 2 nurses on my right between the bed and the wall, and the doctor was at my hip to my left. I asked why so many people. The doctor said the nurses had to be there and the cop had to do a report. I pointed at the shadows at the foot of my bed, but they were gone now. The doc confirmed, there's nobody there. Still dazed and confused, the officer now standing at my hip and the doctor at the foot of the bed told me I was in a car accident. So I asked if there's anyone else injured. People in the other vehicle, walking pedestrians. God forgive me if I hit an innocent animal. Lord knows we have deer, fox, and bunnies in the area. No, just you. It was just you. I'm a good person with a good heart, so maybe it was the relief that I didn't hurt anyone else. I started to cry. The officer kindly wished me a speedy recovery and made his way out. I wiped my tears, opened my eyes, and like that, the worst jump scare in a 3D movie, there was an old man in my face repeatedly saying, "Help me." I froze up. I felt my heart skip a beat. Hair stood on my arms, legs, and neck. I sensed my blood pressure drop and the heart monitor made its noise. Trying to evaluate the situation as best I could, as quick as I could, I looked around. The nurses who were to my right were gone. I must have missed the moment they left. To my left was the old man in full body apparition. It wasn't just him. There were 4 phantoms asking me for help, 3 male and 1 female. They all had clothing, like the kind you would see in Civil War history book era. The nurses rushed in because the beeping machine attached to me, and I passed out. When I woke up, there was a surgeon telling me the extent of my injuries, which I don't feel are relevant for the writing, so I'll leave them out. I asked him to send up the hospital priest. He tried to press for information as to why I wanted the priest, but I simply told him I wanted someone to pray with. Again, I passed out. The time lapses between passing out and waking up were never clear to me. When I woke up, the priest was there with me. He stood to my right in plain clothes, asked why I wanted him there. I asked him to close the door. After he did, I told him everything I saw, the shadow people, the old man, and the other 3 with him asking for help. I asked the priest to pray for any lost souls, to bless the room I laid in, and to bless me with holy water. He told me he understood my concern and would pray for me and come back to check on me. I spent another 3 weeks laying in that hospital bed, passing out and waking up. After making a full recovery, I've gone back to the hospital to visit the cathedral and thank the priest. I don't know if the prayers by the priest helped. I can only hope they did.
A little of my history. I have experienced many entities in my time. Most come and go within a short period of time, but will speak and not hold a conversation with me. Some have stayed for long periods of time and interacted with me to great extent. Some have been overwhelmingly positive, some overwhelmingly negative, as far as convincing me to injure and at times nearly kill myself. And more often, simply neutral entities that just happen to come into contact with. Some can physically touch me, some can speak out loud, as if another person in the room. Though most are closer to telepathic. Sometimes it's paralyzingly terrifying. Sometimes it's life-changingly positive. Usually, again, just a neutral, interesting experience. When entities come, I welcome them. I stop what I'm doing and give them space to say or do whatever they need to communicate. Anyways, today I encountered a new entity. I hopped in bed and immediately felt something patting and caressing my head. I thought, oh, this is nice. Then she threw something at me. It was hard and hit me straight on the throat. At that moment I said out loud, "I would love to get to know you. You are welcome here, but you need to be nice to me." Everything following that was positive. She was shy, but she did tell me some things about herself. She said her name is Tagal. Later I did some research, and it seems that this Telugu word, it's a language of southern India, meaning touching. Other translations include erosive and infectious. That last one definitely concerned me a bit. She was responsive to me and demonstrated that she is capable of both telepathy and external speaking. She had a sense of humor. She sang to me beautifully. She is capable of physically touching me, like my head, and obviously throwing that thing at my throat. To be able to speak externally and physically touch me is rare in my experience. Something unusual. Typically when I hear disembodied voices or entities, whether it's external, internal, or telepathic, I find I instantly know everything about them. What they look like, their age, sex, where they're from, their history, etc. None of this is true to Tegel though. I have no idea what she looks like, how old she is, none of it. I do strongly suspect she is from the Telugu-speaking region of southern India. I believe she used to be a living human and this is her spirit. And she is here to help me. I should add, I live in the US and have zero connection to Hinduism. I've been going through a significantly difficult and confusing time in my life. I think she, her altruistic self, sensed this in the universe and came to find me. Soon, into our interaction, which lasted approximately 3 to 4 hours, it became very clear to me that she was showing me mindfulness, how to stay in the absolute present moment, and to trust myself and my experiences. She only exists in the absolute present moment. Like I said, I've experienced many entities who have come and gone over a short period of time. But I sincerely hope Tegel is one who sticks around. I welcomed her with open arms and invited her to come anytime. Edit. I've been doing some research on Hindu ghosts. There seems to be identifying features when they are seen, but I have not seen Tegel's form, so I cannot say. But it sounds like they often search for milk. I feel such a strong desire to welcome and encourage Tegel to return and continue communicating with me. Such a thing cannot be forced though, and I want to show her I am welcoming her. I think I'll purchase some milk and leave it out for her. Good idea, yes or no?
Okay, so I'm not good at telling stories, but someone suggested I post this on here, so here we go. Let me start off by saying, my family and I have always thought of this to have been a super strange phenomenon, but to this day have not been able to understand what the heck happened. When we were younger, our cousin Daniela always talked to us about how these 2 dolls she had were possessed and plotting to kill her. Well, one of the dolls belonged to her and the other was a porcelain Tinkerbell doll that belonged to her older sister. They shared rooms, by the way. We never paid mind to it because she had a wild imagination. Fast forward into months, maybe even a year into her telling us these stories, one weekend my older sister and I stayed over at her house. It was 4 of us upstairs playing in the room, and we knew to stay on Daniela's side of the room and away from her older sister's side. It was a small room though, and we were children though, so we didn't listen. Somewhere in the middle of being all over the place, we knock down the Tinkerbell doll, and it completely shatters. Immediately, we all freak out because we were told by our aunt to stay away from that side of the room, and we completely disobeyed her. Not to mention my aunt was terrifying, so we knew we were in for an ass beating, lol. We tried thinking of ways to fix it, but there was no way. It was completely shattered, so we start crying, realizing we were screwed. Go downstairs and in tears apologize to our aunt for disobeying her and breaking the doll. She starts yelling at us, then decides to go upstairs and clean up our mess. Here's where things get weird. Once she gets upstairs, she starts screaming at us again, but this time she's calling us liars. We run upstairs and come to find that the doll isn't shattered. It's completely intact and back to where it was before. We immediately look at each other with our jaws open. It was then my cousin Daniela went from being scared with us to almost being relieved and starts saying, "I told you guys I wasn't crazy. The doll is possessed. I told you. I told you." The rest of us ran out of the room and called our parents to come get us. After that day, we refused to go back to that house.
Hey y'all. Just 3 days ago, me and my friend went up to Walmart. There's this pavement trail up by my neighborhood basketball court. And all of a sudden, 3 people almost practically materialized in front of us. Thought nothing of it at first, as the trail is commonly taken. However, upon closer inspection, the people looked like 3 of our friends, down to the exact point. Normally, I would have no problem with this. However, one of our friends had gone to Georgia and the others were at their house. Around this point, we got creeped out, but oh well, might as well keep going, right? We get about halfway up the trail and one of our friends' voices calls out. The voice being exact in cadence, tone, and you name it. This is where things got weirder. Me and my friend both turned around to each other and asked if that was really our friend. From there, we braced ourselves for a silly jump scare and turned the corner of the trail and they were gone. We kept going and saw them again, this time in a home goods parking lot on the way there. We were able to get a good look at them as we were far enough away not to be detected, but close enough to get the details. I saw one of them, our younger friend of the group, was just standing at an angle. I checked his face for identifiable features, but there was no face? I mean, like there was no features whatsoever on his face. It mortified me. The others turned around a little bit, at the same angles they were, preparing to get to the next part of the trail that directly led to Walmart. All their faces were all contorted. I mean, physically impossible kind of contorted. And I realized they were following a particular pathway we followed about a month ago. Down to the exact foot placement, people placement, and everything. They rounded the corner and we followed not far behind. They were gone. Entirely gone. I mean, no trace, nothing. Like they didn't even exist. I brought this up with one of my friends we supposedly encountered, and she freaked out. She was more freaked by the fact that them taking that trail meant that they were nearby anything else. It's sort of become a taboo topic, but I think they followed me home. Just today, I was taking out the garbage and down through this alleyway there is a voice speaking to me. It was the same as my friend's voice, just ever so noticeably yet slightly distorted. I turned and there was 3 figures, shrouded in shadow. Their outlines were the same as those very same quote-unquote friends I had encountered. Needless to say, I finished taking out the trash at lightning speed. I don't really see any of this as extreme right now. I'm more just looking for closure on what had happened. And I really don't need anything immediately. If anyone has any answers, and I know someone does, please let me know. Thank you so much.
This is my first ever Reddit post, because I would love some thoughts on this. Last night I woke in the middle of the night and had my worst fear actualized. There was something standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. I will say right off the bat that this was not an episode of sleep paralysis. I have never had sleep paralysis before and could move the entire time. In fact, I immediately sat up when I saw it. It was completely 3D and solid like a physical form. The light from my LED nightlight reflected off its skin. It was very tall. It wore a headdress of big black feathers that fanned out like a Mayan headdress and reaching my ceiling. Its skin was very dark, almost black. Its eyes were barely visible, but the sockets were surrounded in half circles of white paint. It had white paint smeared near its mouth. It wore only a long tan leather hide draped over its shoulders. Around its neck hung a tangle of dangling objects. Wood? Stone? I don't know what they were. Its chest was exposed, and it had more white paint and messy smears across its chest, almost as if to mimic a rib cage. It stood there, stiff and tall, and it just scared me. It had a menacing feeling, but made no movements to show malice. Perhaps it was simply its primal appearance that made it feel so. Something about it felt ritualistic, but I really can't say why. It stood there for maybe 5 seconds, then it sort of rippled and was gone. It made me so afraid. It was primal and fierce, almost human, yet it definitely was not. In a way, it sort of reminded me of a Kachina doll, although the dolls looked much friendlier. I looked it up and saw ogre Kachinas that had very similar features. Tall feather headdresses, white circles around the eyes, paint on their chests. It may or may not be worth mentioning that a few days before this, I went to Mesilla, New Mexico. Perhaps I linked with something there, or perhaps not. I should also mention that I'm going through some very deep grief, so may be more open and vulnerable to things. I've never had an experience like this before. Does anyone have any thoughts on what this could have been? Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you have any information on these stories that would be helpful to the authors, please email me or reach me on Twitter. Thank you again, BoozeandBoos, for joining me. You did a fantastic job. But until next time, remember, just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't watching you.